want to talk about what I think at least is probably the biggest thing maybe to talk about so far, and that is that last season we saw the San Francisco 49ers hop on a plane, fly to the city of brotherly love, and unfortunately they got absolutely beat down by the Philadelphia Eagles in the NFC Championship. Now, all things considered, Brock Purdy did go down with a crazy elbow injury early on in that game. But both of these teams, they stand at 4-0 so far through the month of the season. So, Steezy, I know you're a Seahawks fan, but is it time for us as fans, as media, as NFL community, is it time for us to embrace the inevitable rematch in this year's NFC Championship between the San Francisco 49ers and the Philadelphia Eagles?
I was kind of thinking that was already the case well before the season even started. Like, we're always out here making predictions, and especially during the off season when there's not too much else to do. Like, I mean, I know you and I, we cover other sports. And so it's not just, our life and our media career revolves around the NFL. But for those people that only cover the NFL and in the off season when there's not much else to talk about, they put together a list of rankings. They put together predictions. And I feel like for a majority of the people, in this part of the world, in this industry, in the media, have all predicted a Philadelphia Eagles versus the San Francisco 49ers NFC Championship game. It's not about if that's going to happen, or it's not about whether or not if it's going to happen, it's when it's going to happen and exactly how it's going to come together. And so I still think that you're pretty right on track if you think that's going to be the case. And so if I'm going to shift the conversation to at least a different, what would I call it? A different part of the topic or of the question, if that makes sense. I still think there's a couple of teams to kind of be on the lookout for. I mean, like you mentioned, the Seahawks. I think the Seattle Seahawks have kind of gotten back on the right track. The bye comes at the right time in week 5. And so I still think Seattle could be a force to be reckoned with down the stretch. The Dallas Cowboys, I was on that train. I mean, last time we did talk, I was hyping up the Dallas Cowboys, but I do think that Trevon Diggs injury is very significant. I do think it's one that probably hold them back from accomplishing what they want to accomplish. And so I think the Lions and the Seahawks definitely, I wouldn't be surprised if one of them kind of sneaks their way in, but for the time being, I wouldn't be mad at you if you predicted that the San Francisco 49ers are going to meet the Eagles in the NFC Championship.
I want to make I've held this position since before the game happened the first time around. I want to make this crystal clear. I was of the mindset heading into that game that the 49ers were going to make it to the Super Bowl. I was of the mindset as that game went on that if Brock Purdy didn't get injured on what was a freak accident, the 49ers would have won that football game. And I am of the mindset to this day that if Brock Purdy doesn't get hurt, they win that football game. And I don't know if they'll win the championship, but at the very least, they're going to go to the Super Bowl. And look, as Germ says, if my aunt had balls, she'd be my uncle. But like, here's the deal, right? The 49ers are, and I don't want to spoil things for later on, but the 49ers are one of the best teams in football. I think their record speaks out also, but it's like top to bottom, they're one of the best teams in football. And there's a lot of Eagles fans that are saying, oh, well, man, if you're saying right now that the Eagles aren't clicking, how scary would it be if the Eagles do start clicking? And I get that. But here's the thing, right? When I watch Philadelphia Eagles football so far, are they clear? Like the 49ers and Eagles, bar best two teams in the conference, I don't really think it's even close. Like there's a considerable margin between who the third and fourth best teams are, which I think at this point we can say it's safe to assume are the Lions and the Seahawks, respectively, however you want to match it up. Those would be there. And then of course with the Cowboys in that tier as well. But the Eagles to me have left a lot on the table. And they've struggled in areas this year that they should not be struggling in. And they've struggled in games this year that they should not be struggling. And I get it. It's any given Sunday and anything can happen. And it is the NFL. But the Eagles concern me a bit. But that's neither here nor there. The Eagles and the 49ers, I think they were my pick. Well, they were my pick, actually. My pick for the NFC Championship game this year was the Cowboys and the Eagles because I thought the Niners were going to foolishly start Trey Lance as quarterback. But with Brock Purdy as quarterback, with what he's been able to do under center this season, with what that defense does, with what that offense does, with what Christian McCaffrey does, who I would say, quiet as kept, should be in contention, if not one of the front runners for MVP this year. These two teams are on an inevitable crash course. And I honestly believe that this time around, that game is going to be held in the Bay Area. I don't think we see that rematch in Philly. We're going to see that rematch in the Bay. Of course, we'll see that rematch again in like week 13 or something. But come playoff time, when we see those two teams go at it again, it will be in the Bay because I do think that the 49ers are going to have the number 1 seed in the NFC. Sticking in the NFC, though, let's talk about some cats for a second. I'm not a cat person. I'm 100% a dog person. But you got the Lions who sit at 3-1, and meanwhile you've got the other 3 cat teams struggling. The Panthers are 0-4. The Bengals are 1-3. The Jaguars are 2-2. Steezy, are the Lions definitively the best cat team in the NFL at this point?
Hey, I love this question. Honestly, I'm gonna have to say yes. You know, when you look at the Jacksonville Jaguars, they were perceived as not only Super Bowl contenders, but as AFC South frontrunners. And even that statement seems to be, I guess, a weird one to say at this point, of the season at this juncture. You look at the Cincinnati Bengals, things are going to get worse before they get better. I know there were reports earlier today that Joe Burrow is feeling as healthy as he has been since he suffered and sustained that calf injury. But you look at T. Higgins, I know he's not expected to miss a lot of time, but these guys are 1-3. And he can't afford to miss any sort of time. And I look at that upcoming matchup, and we're going to talk about it later, but that week 5 matchup against the Arizona Cardinals, that's not a gimme. I think that's very much a trap game in Arizona, a team that beat the Dallas Cowboys for crying out loud just a couple of weeks ago. And so I do think that with some of the issues that have been derailing the Cincinnati Bengals, they could use all the time, all the snaps in the world, for these guys to kind of get back on the same page, for that offense to get back to what it was before. And so given the uncertainty around his health, we don't know if he's going to play week 5. Joe Burrow says that he's healthy as he can be, but we don't know. I mean, that hasn't shown up in his play whatsoever. Jamar Chase is over here ranting, after games, talking about how he's always effing open. And so there's just a lot going on. And then you look at the Panthers. I mean, Panthers are just an absolute mess. I don't see them getting a dub this week. I don't see them getting a dub anytime in the near future. And so they've been a mess. They were going to be a mess. Look, I was a fool for thinking that they could be sneaky contenders to win, their division. But my gosh, I completely forgot to look at their lack of weapons. I know Adam Thielen has been doing his thing, but other than that, no other wide receiver seems to be able to gain consistent separation. Bryce Young has already missed a game. Panthers defense littered with injuries. All that being said, yes, the Detroit Lions are far and away the best cat team in the National Football League, and it's not even close.
I mean, as much as it pains me to agree here, I kind of have to agree. Yeah, the Lions are the best cat team in football. I want to take this time, though. I want to do what I think I'm good at, which is talk bad about other teams. I want to start with the Jacksonville Jaguars. I very early on, and for those of you guys that follow the podcast, there's only one. There was only up until this offseason one quarterback, one player ever who I referred to by their full name. That was Joseph Lee Burrow. And this offseason, I looked up and I got on this show and I said, hey, man, we might need to start talking about William Trevor Lawrence in a different way. And so far, they're 2-2. And so as it stands right now, I can't go all in on the triple name. I can't go all in on the full government. I have to stick to Trevor Lawrence because this isn't the Prince. Like this isn't the next big thing that we saw towards the end of last season. And I don't know exactly what the issue is. I don't really understand what the problem is. Now, I would like to think that maybe Calvin Ridley's presence was supposed to be of some help, but it hasn't really been of some help up to this point, although they did do a pretty good job of beating, the Falcons of all teams in London this past week. And they get another game overseas this week as well. They get to stay in London and have some fun. But when you look at the Jacksonville Jaguars, to your point, not only were they supposed to be the front runners for the AFC South, they were, and I'm already saying this, they're supposed to be the 4th best team in the conference. When you think about their schedule, when you think about the talent they had on the page, you think about how far they went and how they got to where they got to last season, and they're 2-2, and statistically they're 3rd in the division right now behind both the Colts and the Texans. That's not good. When you stay in the AFC and look at the Cincinnati Bengals, who are deadlocked in 5th, tied with 5 other teams for the worst division in the conference, with the Jets who don't have a quarterback, with the Patriots who don't have anything, with the Raiders who don't have a quarterback, and with the Broncos who don't have anything but Walmart money. That's not good company that you want to keep. And so again, like I can't sit here in good conscience and refer to Joe Burrow as Joseph Lee Burrow the way I have in the past, because let's be frank, he hasn't been playing. like Joseph Lee Burrow so far through 4 weeks of the season. Not all that's his fault, right? I'm on record as saying it was a bad decision to have for the Cincinnati Bengals to let Joe Burrow start week 1 and not let him get that calf healed up, because as much as Joe Burrow says that he is as healthy as ever, that calf's not going to heal over time. It's not going to get closer. The only thing that's going to help that calf heal is rest. And the Bengals aren't necessarily getting rest anytime soon. And they also need Joe Burrow at this point. Like, not only is Joe Burrow hurt and they're playing bad, but Joe Burrow's hurt, they're playing bad, and they're going all the way to Nashville, Tennessee just to kick a field goal. Like, it's not good. It's not good. And when you come to the NFC and you talk about the Carolina Panthers, Bryce Young has not looked like the number 1 overall pick so far through 4 weeks of the season. Adam Thielen looks old, which, I mean, he is old. The run game with Miles Sanders and Chuba Hubbard has not been what people thought it was going to be. And they are sorely missing one DJ Moore. And so I look at it from that perspective. I have to, not just by default, but also by fact, I have to give the credit to the Detroit Lions to say that they're the best cat team in the league right now. And they're the only cat team that's roaring right now. They're 3-1. They got a big win against my Packers this past Thursday on Thursday Night Football. It was a huge win for them. Take nothing away from what they did. I know we have look, we have our problems, but they came up and they showed up to play. And their one loss, let's be frank, let's be very honest about what we're talking about. Their one loss is to a good football team in the Seattle Seahawks, but it could have gone either way. Like, they could be 4-0 right now. And so when I look at it from that perspective, when I look at what they've done offensively, when I look at the fact that J-Mo, he's back and he's ready to go after serving that suspension because of gambling, like, the Lions are only going to continue to get better. And now they have sole possession of the NFC North. We're talking about a situation where the Bears, you can forget about it. And I would say the Vikings, too, you can forget about it. They're like, the difference between the Lions and the Packers is already one game because the Packers have lost to the Lions. All the Lions have to do the rest of the way is just continue to be one game better than the Packers. And they're not only making it to the playoffs, but they're doing something they've never done before, which is win this division. The Lions have never won the NFC North, and they are on pace to do so far through 4 weeks of the season. I hate to say this as a Packers fan, but the Detroit Lions unequivocally and undeniably are the best cat team in the NFL today.
Undoubtedly, unequivocally, and undeniably. I'm right there with you, Dwayne. You look at the Detroit Lions. I mean, what do they not have? They have a reliable running attack. They have weapons. They have an above-average offensive line. They have defensive playmakers. They have a great coaching staff. They have guys that can motivate and uplift. They have a bargaining culture. I mean, what are they missing? An elite quarterback? But, I mean, outside of that, they have literally everything else. And we've seen Jared Goff. I know he wasn't the driving force, but he's a quarterback that started in the Super Bowl. And so we know what he's capable of. And now that he has the stage set, I mean, again, what is he missing? Now with Jameson Williams coming back, now he has a deep threat to kind of stretch the field. That's going to open things up for Sam Laporta, underneath. That's going to open things up for Amon-Ra St. Brown. That's going to open things up for Jahmyr Gibbs. He's only going to be incorporated more and more into the game plan as the season progresses. David Montgomery's over here having a touchdown fest. I mean, he could have more touchdowns than Jamal Williams at 17 last year. And so, for fantasy owners out there that took him in the later rounds, I mean, my gosh, did you get blessed? So, yeah, Dwayne, I mean, I'm right there with you. I think it's disrespectful to even talk about these other cat teams and mention them in the same breath as the Detroit Lions.
And it's crazy to think that we live in a world where the Detroit Lions are the best cat team in the NFL. Right. Speaking of being the best team in anything, the Houston Texans are 2-2. And granted, the entire division is 2-2, but this isn't about the Houston Texans. This is about CJ Stroud, who so far through 4 weeks of the season is clearly, and this is no disrespect to Bijan Robinson, but in my opinion, they're both 2-2. So in my opinion, he's clearly the front runner for Offensive Rookie of the Year to this point of the season. What he's able to do has been historic, literally historic. He has I think the second most passing yards to start a career at this point through 4 weeks of the season. And if I'm not mistaken, he has the most yards thrown without an interception, or he's at least approaching that record. I know that Dak Prescott in 2016 set a record similar to that. I don't know if it was for passing yards, if it was for passing attempts to start a career without an interception, but again, you guys know me. I talked a lot about how Justin Herbert doesn't get the credit he deserves because he had an electrifying Offensive Rookie of the Year season, and a lot had to do with what he was able to do as it pertains to history. And CJ Stroud so far is etching his name into the history books so far through 4 weeks of the season. If you had to rate CJ Stroud's season on a 5-star scale, How many stars are you giving CJ Stroud so far?
This is gonna sound crazy, but I'm gonna have to give him 4.5 stars. And the only reason why it's that much is because I had to adjust the weight just a little bit. You know, when you kind of consider the circumstances, you look at the Houston Texans, they're just a complete and utter mess. And for them to even be at 500 through 4 weeks of the season, that in and of itself is damn near a miracle. And when you look at how he's been performing, he's been the driving force behind, these wins. He's playing good, clean football. He's throwing accurate passes. His ball placement has been a revelation. In Houston, he's turning these guys into playmakers. He's making the offensive line look better than what it actually is. He's doing the defense favors. I mean, what doesn't he possess? The leadership. I mean, I see a leader. I see an alpha, a future alpha. I see a future Pro Bowler. I see all pros. Like, he's been as good as advertised and then some. And so to me, it almost seems astronomical that prior to the NFL draft actually taking place, his name was getting slandered like crazy, like none other. People were talking about about the time, I guess, when he apparently flaked on Peyton Manning in the passing academy. Like, that was supposed to drag his draft stock down. People were talking about, what was it, the Wonderlic score, his Wonderlic score, whatever that score was, that was so minuscule that people were really concerned about him, whether or not he was going to fall out of the top 10. And so now when I'm looking back, I'm going back to all that. Did all those people know something that we didn't? Or did they all know what we're just now finding out? And they were trying to hide teams from unlocking or from seeing that version of a CJ Stroud. Like, that's what I'm starting to think it is. Like, there was intentionally and deliberately sabotaging him and his draft value, a la Laramie Tunsil. I know the Laramie Tunsil situation was a lot cloudier, no pun intended, prior to him getting drafted. But I think those are two similar situations, and it's ironic that they now both play for the Houston Texans. But yeah, I think I'd have to give him 4.5 stars. Again, I have to adjust the weight just a little bit considering the circumstances, but I think the future is very, very bright for CJ Stroud.
Here's what's beautiful to me about what CJ Stroud has done. Week 1, blasted by the Ravens, as expected. Week 2, they lost to the Colts, 31-20. Kind of close game, but I do think that the score was a lot closer than what the game actually was. They followed up with not just a win against the Jacksonville Jaguars, not even just a win on the road against the Jacksonville Jaguars, but they got a statement win on the road against the Jaguars, a team that, as we mentioned, was expected to run away with this division, and then they followed it up at home during J.J. Watt's Ring of Honor night, or afternoon rather, because they don't play at night, with an absolute beatdown on the Pittsburgh Steelers. So much so that the Pittsburgh Steelers are thinking about making massive changes throughout the course of the ranks of the coaching staff and on the field, because that's how bad they looked this past Sunday. Here's what's beautiful about this for CJ Stroud. Number one, these next 2 games heading into the bye, they've got to go to Atlanta and they have to host New Orleans. Atlanta's another young team. That game could go either way, but if I had to make a pick right now, gun to my head, I'm taking the Texans in this game against the Falcons. And I know that's crazy to think because of what Bijan has done, but let's be honest, what CJ Stroud has done through the air, I expect CJ Stroud to absolutely carve up this Atlanta Falcons secondary. And then they have to host the New Orleans Saints, who Derek Carr has admitted has not been offensively what they're supposed to be. But here's the other thing too. And I know we talked about this a lot last season because of what Dameon Pierce did in respect to, what K9 Kenneth Walker did for you as a Seahawks fan. So far through 4 weeks of the season, CJ Stroud has 242, 384, 280, and 306 passing yards, right? His leading receivers have been Nico Collins in week 1 with 80 yards receiving, Nico Collins in week 2 with 146, Tank Dell got the job done in week 3 with 145, and Nico Collins did it this past week with 168. The rushing attack, they've yet to rush for more than 100 yards in a game so far this season. Dameon Pierce has 38. Dameon Pierce has 31. Singletary had 41. Dameon Pierce had his season high so far through the season with 81 rush yards. What's so beautiful about that to me is we know what Dameon Pierce can do. We saw what he could do last season. Like, we know what he can do when he's fully unlocked, when he fully hits his stride. And what I'm saying is, when you look at what CJ Stroud has done and how lethal he's been, when you look at how lethal Nico Collins and Tank Dell has been, when you add in that Dameon Pierce factor, once he gets rolling, you have what I would say is arguably one of, if not the best young core offensively. Now, again, I'm not saying that they're better than a Joe Burrow, a Jamar Chase, and a T. Higgins at their best. No, I'm not saying that they're better than what you guys have out there in Seattle. I'm not saying they're better than the 49ers. I'm not saying they're better than the Eagles. But what I'm saying is when we're talking about youth, these are all guys. Stroud's a rookie. Dell is a rookie. Collins is a rookie. Pierce is in year 2. Like, is there a team that has that much youth at the quarterback, running back, and wide receiver positions that can be as lethal as they can be? When I look at the schedule coming out of the bye, they have the Panthers, who are struggling, as we talk about. They have the Buccaneers, who are 3-1 right now. But let's be honest, they're still the Buccaneers. Like, it's still Baker Mayfield. Like, I don't know. The Bengals should be better by week 10, but are they really going to be better by week 10? You got the Cardinals. Like as you go on, I know no one expected this, and they can, of course, fall back down and regress to the mean and be the Texans that we all know and hate and love to laugh at. But we could be talking about a scenario where maybe this division isn't just as open and shut as we thought it would be. And maybe that the Houston Texans are not just competing for a right to get back into the swing of things as far as being competitive like how they were under Deshaun Watson. But maybe we could talk about them making the playoffs and winning a division this season, because this division, by no stretch of the imagination, so far has an impressive team. The Jaguars are struggling. The Colts are struggling. The Titans are struggling. Like, this is a 2-2 division from top to bottom. It's anybody's game. And if there's one team that I would say right now, based on what we've seen for a month of the season, has my vote at least into the next month of the season about taking the edge, I feel like it has to be the Houston Texans based on what we've seen from CJ Stroud.
And I mean, given that list of opponents that you just gave out, those are all winnable games, the Bengals and the Buccaneers included. And so you kind of look at that, and you also look at the fact that CJ Stroud is ahead of Justin Herbert, who you talked about earlier today, and that phenomenal rookie season that he had as a passer. Ironically speaking, CJ Stroud has more passing yards than Justin Herbert right now, who actually has been setting the NFL on fire, at least offensively. I mean, in the fantasy world, too. I have a lot of shares of Justin Herbert, and my gosh, he's been producing. But CJ Stroud, 4th in the National Football League with 1,212 passing yards, more than Joe Burrow, just behind Tua, just behind Kirk Cousins, just behind Matthew Stafford. I mean, for him to even be in the top 5 is just absolutely and utterly insane. I mean, one of the biggest knocks on his football team was a quote-unquote lack of weapons. And so, I mean, for him to be doing this in the game, like you talked about, no run game, like, my gosh, like, how bright is the future for this guy? Imagine if they add one more weapon, give him a few more offensive linemen, a more innovative coach, if he even needs one offensively. Look, the sky's absolutely the limit. And I said this on Emmett's show. I'm on record saying this. I'll try to look for the film for the tape if I can. But I remember being on Emmett's show a couple of months ago, and I talked about how the Houston Texans could surprise everybody and potentially win the AFC South. And so I'm going to look for that. And when I find that, I'm going to send it to you.
Hey, I would say at this point in the season, it's fair game, and I wouldn't be surprised at all.